Hello, everyone, and welcome to LDM Radio Sports Talk, the show that talks about sports and other topics relatable to sports fans. Joining me this week in a remote location in Pennsylvania is Scott Blander.
Hey, Franz, thanks for having me back. Appreciate it.
All right. So we are going to jump in. We have a lot of local action going on. If you're a fan of Manhattan or Bronx teams, not for you, but there is a lot of local action going on in the playoffs. So we're going to start with the NHL. We're going to talk about the New York Islanders versus the Tampa Bay Lightning in the conference semifinals round. What are your thoughts on what's going on? What do you see? And who do you think is going to end up taking this series ultimately?
Well, like I said last time I was on, I'm as a knowledgeable hockey fan, I'm trying to be objective, but I just can't with the Islanders. But they impressed me because I didn't think they were going to get past the second round, and obviously they did. To be honest with you, I thought Boston was the best team in the league. I really did, since they got Taylor Hall and Riley on defense. But and that terrifies me that they won that in 6 and then took game 1 on top of that. I'll tell you what, it's a great series, and what I will say objectively is that the Islanders are a fun team to watch. They really are. I mean, I hate them. I want them to lose, but they are making some very entertaining hockey. I'll give them that. And first 2 games, definitely quality, and the Islanders jumped right on them. Game 1 in Tampa, they made a statement. I hoped, I guess, maybe I'm being a little biased, but I hoped that Tampa would make short work of them, but surely they're split, and they're going back to a very, very loud, got to give them credit there, very loud Nassau Coliseum. I mean, I wish we had that kind of crowd noise at the Garden these days. But no, it's a great series so far. It will probably be a long one, I would imagine, 6 or 7. How about yourself?
Absolutely. So, I'm actually envious of the crowd noise too, and I think Nassau, like Long Island, Nassau Coliseum in general, I think they're having kind of what the Winnipeg Jets went through, except they didn't actually lose the team completely. So my point there is the original Winnipeg Jets, they ended up moving to Phoenix to become the Phoenix Coyotes, and then a couple years they ended up not having a team, and then the Atlanta Thrashers ended up folding and then moving up to Winnipeg, and then the Winnipeg team ended up reborn, the Winnipeg Jets again, just a different franchise, but they ended up rolling over every other, like the logos and everything else like that. And then now Winnipeg seems to be like one of the places to be. Like this is one of those like high-end places where the fans are 100% like super loud, and like they create their own atmosphere, and it's like a great place to be. And now they like sell out all the time, so it was almost like with Winnipeg, the city itself losing the team, they were like super amped, and they appreciated it more the second time around. I think that's part of what we have seen through the Nassau Coliseum since like they ended up the Islanders ended up moving to Brooklyn for a little bit, and then that didn't work out, and then they ended up like splitting time in between the two. But then like every game that was in Nassau Coliseum was like, it wasn't like you could just get in there for like $10 and it was like a bunch of room, and like almost what is the New Jersey Devils, like where they play now, where it's like super desolate most of the time and things like that. Like this is like a reborn atmosphere. And I think that's the benefit of what's going on now. And then they are capitalizing on that, and they're going to go into Belmont. So they're going to go into a new arena with this newborn, like appreciation for the Islanders. And I think at this point they already sold out everything for next season. So it's an exciting time to be an Islanders fan, and Islanders, as far as the organization goes as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think, those seasons they played in Brooklyn, I don't, they were never really home there. It was an arena that wasn't built for hockey. The sight lines were terrible. And I mean, if anyone out there's not familiar with the LIE, the Long Island Expressway, it's a 2-lane highway in each direction. Traffic 24 hours a day. So people from Long Island were not going to Brooklyn for the most part to go see the game. And I think you hit it right on the head. I think they're just very excited to have their team back. And I think it almost felt like in those instances where you described, like the Winnipeg Jets, like the Cleveland Browns, they moved to Baltimore, and then they just formed a new team, same name. It's almost a similar, even though the team itself, never technically didn't move. It's almost a similar situation to like you just described with the Jets. They were never really home there because they weren't really bringing all of Long Island with them, and now they're back on Long Island, and yeah, it's a raucous crowd. They are definitely letting the team know they are happy to have them back, and yeah, it's from a neutral hockey observer standpoint, it's I like watching the games when they're home. It makes for very exciting playoff hockey.
Yeah, so it was a good idea, bad execution from going to Brooklyn, because you would think that the fans that already existed in Long Island would just move over, so it would be like nothing lost there, and then being in Brooklyn, there would be like a new local hometown team to gravitate toward, and they would grow a new fan base. So you're almost like doubling in size. Good idea, bad execution, because of what you said. The sight lines were awful. The commute from Long Island to get to Brooklyn, oftentimes one of the biggest complaints was that a lot of Long Islanders couldn't get there for 7:30, so it was like not even worth making the trip. And also like paying $20 and things like that. There were just a whole bunch of issues that led to that folding. Which ended up being great, because now it turned into they have the Nassau back, which is like one of the most electric arenas for anybody who hasn't been there. I've been there one time for Rangers and Islanders game, and it was a pain in the butt to get there, but it was still a great atmosphere. And now they have playoff hockey there. So to get back to the present day, I think they are definitely a entertaining bunch. I think it's not more of I don't think that they're not the flashy like top line taking over, kind of like what you see in a Boston or with the Colorado Avalanche. It's almost like just a team that everybody has like a hard hat, and they all just work toward the same goal, try to keep it close until the end, and then pull away at the end. That seems to be what it is. Either sit down on a lead, or like keep it tied up until towards the end, and then they try to take the lead. So what I think in this series is, this is like the third time they've faced each other in 5 years, and this is the past two times it's been the Tampa Bay Lightning who have won, but it always seems to have been close. So it's not like they're getting the doors blown off of them. So if you think about it, the more chances that they end up having to face each other, the more likely that the Islanders can actually break through, which for Rangers fans, it's a scary thought. But, for everybody else, like for the state of hockey in New York, Long Island, which is also an extension of New York, it's just it's a great time to be an Islanders fan right now, because, you can sense it, like they're not the Lightning, they're a great team, but the Islanders aren't getting pushed over. They're, it's a great battle of will.
Yeah, no, I mean, like I said, I wish I was hoping for a sweep, or could technically end in 5, but I don't think it will. But I mean, the Islanders made a statement. They took game 1. They came right out the gate flying, and no, they definitely proved they deserve to be on the same ice. I think you're right. The more times you play a team, the same team, the more difficult it is to win. How many times have you seen like in the NFL, one team, in the division beats a team twice and then loses to them in the playoffs?
Yep.
It's sports wide. Eventually the Islanders are going to get tired of losing to Tampa. Hopefully not this particular. but it could very well be. And I think the Islanders window of contention is just opening. I mean, they're there. Conference final. They have playoffs. What 3 years in a row now? Conference finals last year. So
Yep.
I mean, they're there. I'm sure in this offseason, whether they win the cup or not, they're going to add some pieces. They're going to get even stronger. But they're a good, young, exciting team to watch, and they have certainly arrived for contention. I think if they were to win the Stanley Cup this particular year, it would not be an upset of any kind. They are ready. They're ready to do it. And they might probably have the best coach in the game to help them do it, and really put that team together quicker than anybody really anticipated.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was. I mean, the pieces were there. I think because if you look at it, you got Josh Bailey, you have Matt Barzell, a lot of the pieces that are like the whole fourth line. None of those were really brought in except for like Matt Martin ended up leaving and coming back. But this team wasn't really built on like from the new regime. I think the new regime with the Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz is basically like they just worked better with the pieces that they had. I don't think maybe like Jordan Emberley. I don't know if he might be borderline came in, but if you look at the teams except for like Pajau and then the two guys they got from the Devils this year, those are like the mid-season acquisitions. But everybody else, like this is a whole team effort. Like you have like Ryan Pulock, who's tied for the lead in game-winning goals this postseason as a defenseman. You have Adam Pelech, who's turning into a star, like turning into like a stalwart, the typical like stay-at-home defenseman, like who basically every team needs in the NHL, like one of those like real stay-at-home like stalwart blocking defenseman. He's becoming a star in that position. So these are all people who were already in place, and I think like Barry Trotz and the leadership is just utilizing the talent better.
Yeah, no, I agree. Coaching is everything. I think in all the four sports, all the four major sports, maybe with the exception of football, but I think hockey is probably up there as number one. The difference that a great coach can make, and the negativity that a not great coaching can make. I mean, look at the Rangers for Tortorella. I think he held them back. AV, I think he held them back. David Quinn kind of got a raw deal because the Rangers were rebuilding and they weren't really there yet. That being said, I don't know if we'll get to that later. If you want to jump into that, I'm super stoked about the Rangers' new coach, Gallant. But I'm looking at. I didn't mean to get off topic. I'm looking at I pulled up Palmieri's stats because you mentioned the late season acquisitions and Palmieri. I mean, Palmieri's 14 playoff games, 7 goals, 2 assists, plus 7. Barzal's come on real strong in the last 7-8 games or so, but Palmieri's pretty much been their MVP, and that was a late season acquisition, so you got to give him credit for that.
Last two off seasons. Last off season they brought in Andy Green, who was a defenseman for the Devils, and they brought in John Gabriel Pajau, and then this year's addition was going back to the well of the Devils and getting Kyle Palmieri and Travis Zajac. So definitely some great acquisitions, but I think it goes back to there's no real like superstar power. Like there's not anybody who, if they go down, like it really cripples the entire team. Like it's just basically everybody's just working toward like it's just a whole bunch of it's just a team effort. That's the beauty part of what the Islanders are going after. Except and then they're on the other side. You have a team full of superstars who ended up having a bit of a controversy because right now they're sitting $17 million above the cap. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I was just discussing that with a friend of mine yesterday. That is a loophole that I'm going to. I think it's a safe assumption is going to get closed at the next CBA, which will probably be the next lockout. But that's a story for another time. But that's because I didn't really, I didn't really know what people were talking about until it was explained to me yesterday. And yeah, that's kind of ridiculous that they were able to they were able to get these guys in after not playing at all. Um, and I'm sure somebody raised a good point that they should make it that if a player, one of the changes that they should make, and probably I would assume will, is that if a player doesn't play at all in the regular season, he can't play in the playoffs. That way you can't, even if you've got like an injury prone guy like Stamkos, and I'm pretty sure Stamkos actually played during the regular season, but if you've got an injury prone guy, just sit a guy the entire. I'm not saying Tampa did this because I don't believe they did. I think it just kind of happened that way, and they took advantage of a loophole. But if a team was actually going to sit a guy an entire season and bring him in fresh for the playoffs, that's something they need to do away with. And again, I'm not saying Tampa did that because I don't think they would keep these big guns out. Like it was Kucherov was one of them, right? Wasn't he out for?
I'd say Kucherov. They 100% did that with. I think it was just a circumstance, though. I don't think that was the original plan, but since they were basically already in the neighborhood of him, going down, they ended up just keeping him out. He probably could have came back, a couple weeks and left into the season, but they held him out for the cap purpose, which that is basically the biggest issue because $7 million out of the $17 million that they're over the cap are players that are not coming back. So you're basically just talking about Kucherov is the main goal. And then, Stamkos was in the season, and then he ended up getting hurt, which classically, seems like an annual thing for him, unfortunately. So, they just kept him out a couple, like an extra week or two. That wasn't really a big deal. The biggest thing was Kucherov because Kucherov makes like $9 million, so he was really the big one.
Yeah, that's something they need to fix. I mean, you can't fault Tampa. The system is what the system is, and they're taking advantage of it. You can't blame them for doing that. That being said, I would imagine the next collective bargaining agreement will have some kind of precautions, some kind of stipulations to make sure that this does not happen again. I mean, theoretically, you bring these guys back, they should have 17 million of other salaries should get cut. I mean, when you talk about the big guns they make, 17 million would be about 3, 4, 5 players to make up the difference. 3, 4, 5 players that aren't Kucherov and Stamkos. But I mean, that has to change. If there's $17 million over the cap in the third round of the playoffs, that's not fair. Again, not Tampa's fault. The rule is what the rule is, and they took advantage of it. Can't really fault them for that. But they need to do something about that coming up. When they hammer out the new CBA, and that's great. That's another another major issue that will prolong negotiations and shorten the season.
That's crazy. So let's go on to the other conference. I like to say the Western Conference, but it's not exactly the Western Conference. So we have the other semifinal matchup is the Vegas Golden Knights going against the very East Coast Montreal Canadiens. So far in this series, we've seen Vegas come out in the game 1 in Las Vegas, and they were absolutely dominated the team. And like Montreal, they had for people at home there, they had like a so-so regular season. They scraped into the playoffs. They ended up going to the brink of elimination against the Toronto Maple Leafs, down 3-1, and then they ended up winning the next 3 games to advance 4-3. And then they absolutely bulldozed the Winnipeg Jets to the point that they did not even trail for 1 second of those 4 games of that series. And they ended up moving on to where we are now, which is the Western semifinals, I guess, against the heavily favored Vegas Golden Knights. So the first game went as you would assume, was 4-1. 3 defensemen ended up scoring for Vegas, and they just absolutely Montreal looked absolutely overmatched in the game. And then last night's game, it was a very different story. Montreal came out hot. Instead of they basically came out hot for those first two periods, and they built a 3-0 lead. Vegas came chipped away with a late goal in the second and a goal in the middle of the third, and it seemed like they never really seemed like they were going to get the tie. You know, like some of those games that you could kind of feel it coming, and you just in this one you did not. So right now the series is 1-1. So both series are actually 1-1. What are your thoughts on this series?
Um, they remind me a lot of the Islanders. They're a team that maybe not quite as strong because the Islanders were there all regular season. Montreal wasn't. In fact, I was joking with Patrick, a Montreal friend, that Rangers actually had more points than them and would have made it. But you know what? This is hockey. There's a reason why 16 teams get in. We've seen, in the old school seedings, we've seen 8s beat 1s all the time. It happens all the time. 7s over 2s. So you get hot at the right time. It's playoff hockey. I don't think in any other sport is there a difference, as big of a difference between playoffs and regular season, and just the level of play and the intensity. And don't forget, they're doing all this without fans. They did it in the first round without fans. They added 2,500. Everybody else they're playing's got a full house. So, you talk about home ice advantage. They are distinctively behind the 8 ball in home ice advantage, and they're still getting it done. And I think they're basically facing a much better favored Vegas team, similar to how the Islanders are facing a much more favored Tampa team. And like you said, game one kind of went how we thought, and it was like, well, here comes a sweep. It was fun while it lasted. Montreal jumps out to a 3-0 lead, holds on, and gets the split in Vegas. So they obviously came to play. They obviously, they're sweeping the Jets last round, not a fluke. Them getting into the playoffs, not a fluke. And it's going to be a very interesting series. I know they're up in the they're up in the attendance by 1,000. A whopping 3,500 is going to be at the Bell Center for Game 3, but it's something. And yeah, they just made that series very interesting. I think if 2-0 is not the end of a series, but I think if Vegas had gone up 2-0, or especially if they had come from behind, it was it was 3-0 Montreal. Vegas made it 3-2. Had Montreal blown that and Vegas went up 2-0, that series is over just because of the way it would have gone. But no, Montreal made a statement. They took a game in Vegas. It's a sold out, rowdy crowd in Vegas. Another great atmosphere. And Montreal even the series, and they're going home with the split. So we got two very interesting conference finals this year, and I'm as a hockey fan, I'm excited about it.
Yeah, I think one of the things about this series is it's actually knee deep in leadership. So if you look at the Vegas side, so they have their captains Mark Stone, and then you have two former captains in Alex Pietrangelo and Max Pacioretty, who Pacioretty was actually a captain for the Montreal Canadiens before moving over to the Vegas Golden Knights. So that's a thick storyline, which at the end of last night's game, Pacioretty was getting at somebody. I don't know who it was, but there's definitely some bad blood from somewhere going on over there, which is pretty fun to watch. And then on the other side, you have Eric Stahl, who was a captain for the Carolina Hurricanes, and you have Shea Weber, and then there's another one that it escapes me at the moment, but there's a lot of former captains in this series, which it actually on paper it doesn't look like that great of a matchup, but it's working. So Montreal Canadiens, like whatever formula they have, is absolutely just working to the point that it's got them this far. And they had a really mediocre regular season. Like nobody really seen this coming. Even their own fans. Their own fans are like, "Oh my God, we won again!" It's like it's a shock, and it's just shock for everybody. Oh, and one of the biggest pieces of that is Carey Price, the eventual Hall of Famer, is really taking advantage of his what might be one of his last go rounds deep into the playoffs.
Yeah, so you got two Hall of Famers in nets in this series, and Montreal is basically taking a page from Vegas. Remember, Vegas from the onset, from their inception 4 years ago, have been a Stanley Cup contender. Um, and don't misinterpret this when I say that they changed the rules of the draft, because that's not a negative. That's not a negative. I don't say that in the negative. They did change the rules of the draft. All those '90s expansion teams, the Sharks, the Ducks, Tampa, they were miserable for 10 years because you could just give up your dead wood. But they wanted to make Vegas competitive off the bat. Now, nobody saw them, being as good as they were as they are right off the bat. But again, not really. You can't really pinpoint any superstars on that team. Just like we said, just like you said with the Islanders, and they just have a system that works. And Montreal is a similar team. You got two teams, no real superstars, but Vegas has been meshing all year, but Montreal meshed at the right time, and it surely helps when you got a Hall of Famer in net, deep into the playoffs. So I think you got two similarly built teams in that they don't really have a go-to guy. They're just a bunch of guys that are, play well together with knowing they can rely. It's probably a big confidence booster when you don't have that kind of superstar, knowing that your superstar is in net. It's probably, helps with the confidence, knowing that he'll take care of you. And Carey Price has obviously been taking care of Montreal, and obviously Marc-Andre Fleury, another Hall of Famer, backstop in Vegas. So I think the two teams their records certainly don't indicate that they're similar teams, but as we're watching, through game two, they're probably a little more similar than people anticipated.
So looking ahead at what could be, there is the potential matchup if Montreal and Tampa Bay end up facing off against each other. That it would be the Atlantic Stanley Cup, because they're normally in the same division in non-COVID times. So that would be pretty interesting. Other than that, like Montreal versus New York, it's a sexy matchup. Or Vegas against Tampa Bay would probably be the best pound for pound talent matchup. But it wouldn't decredit if the Islanders end up facing off against Las Vegas. And then you have there's actually there's a part of Las Vegas that has like a New York setting, or they got the Statue of Liberty and things like that. So it would be like a weird spin if New York is facing Los Angeles. Las Vegas for their Stanley Cup. So a lot of great storylines yet to be told. It'll be fun to see how everything ends up playing out.
Yeah, and I'll say what I would like to see. I guess it depends on the perspective. From an objective hockey fan's perspective, I would probably want to see the Islanders and Vegas, and I think that those two teams match up really well, specifically with the offense. The Islanders are more a defensive based team. However, like we said, with the addition of Palmieri, that's a whole new dimension of offense, and they're scoring goals now, and they're getting plenty of opportunities. So they become a lot more offensive than they were last year, because I know last year they were strictly built on defense, and that defense is what got them to the conference finals. But this is a different story. So I think from an objective hockey fan's standpoint, I would like to see a Vegas Islanders, or I would even go with Montreal Islanders, and just Montreal just because of it's Montreal. I've been there. We were there. We were there for a playoff game. It was nuts.
Right.
You want to compare it to Lambeau Field, old school Yankee Stadium in the playoffs. Just some of the Wrigley Field, just some of the best playoff atmosphere, in the world and all of sports. Montreal is up there. I'm sure Toronto is just as good, but from a hockey standpoint, unless you're a Boston fan, you got to want Montreal in the finals just as a hockey fan.
I think it would be a super sweet setup for Las Vegas if they ended up facing the Islanders after facing Montreal, because you're basically facing the same kind of structured team. Heavy on the defense. rely on goaltending, and then you get your spare scoring from here and there, um, as opposed to if you're going from a Montreal, which is a defensive-based team, over to the Tampa Bay Lightning, who are just like a high wire act when it comes to offense and just like heavy outputs of scoring and scoring from all over. That would be, I think it would be better for Vegas if they ended up facing Montreal and then ended up facing New York. I think they'd be more set up for success at that point, just from
Yeah.
an objective standpoint. But at the same time, if the in the first round series, the Minnesota Wild, who are basically a defensive crippling team. They had issues with them, and they ended up taking them to 7 games, and the Vegas Golden Knights got shut out twice. So in that series, so this is not exactly a layup to go through a defensive team in Montreal with a great goaltender, and then having to potentially play against New York.
Yeah. I mean, we can speculate this for hours. It's gonna, it'll be what it'll be. And I'll tell you what. And Tampa is quickly getting a bad rap here because of the salary cap situation. They're quickly becoming a hated team, league wide and sports wide. We covered that, but if we can get past that, I mean, Tampa, is just so exciting to watch because there's something to be said for a defensive team that. The proverbial offense wins games, defense wins championships, so that's fine. Defense, but their defense is no slouch either. That being said, just their offense is just ridiculous. I mean, they've got so much talent, so many snipers. Victor Hedman, probably the best defenseman in the league. Just as good, if not better, offensively as he is defensively, and he's phenomenal defensively. I mean, Tampa, just giving you another angle of from a hockey fan's perspective of the finals. This has nothing to do with not wanting the Islanders in the finals because I started off with that. But right. Tampa, from an entertainment standpoint of just high flying superstar sniper hockey, not to mention Vasilevsky is you got him or Carey Price. It's a flip of the coin who the best goalie in the league right now is. It's a flip of the coin, depending on who you talk to. So that would be interesting as well to see a Montreal Tampa finals because Montreal, you got a ridiculous offense against a ridiculous defense. Both, the two best goaltenders. One thing you can't argue is that those two are 1 and 2. Whatever you want as 1 and who do you want as 2? Argumentative, but you do have 1 and 2, and that's not even debatable. That would be for an interesting final. It's always nice, to see stellar goaltending on both ends when it gets to the final. So, you know what? We got 4 great teams. It's exciting. Any combination will do. Will make for a great finals.
Absolutely. One point that you made about Vasilevsky, I think if he's going to fall into the same stigma as Martin Brodeur when they talk about great goaltenders, because they were, when you talk about great goalies pound for pound in history, the one of the biggest knocks on Martin Brodeur was that he played in a heavy defensive structure with the trap, and to the point that they don't even allow a lot of the rules that the Devils that were able to defensively employ on other teams. And now we have Vasilevsky, who's on the opposite side. He's on a powerhouse with a bunch of offensive talent. And, depending on how the rest of his career goes, if he ends up staying here and all these superstars end up still being here, he could win like 4 or 5 cups, but it'd always be like, what would you do if you were on like a lesser team and not on a star-studded team with like 4 Hall of Famers in front of you all the time? So, this is something that Marc-Andre Fleury could have fallen into, but then him actually moving to Vegas and having sustained success kept him. He basically jumped out of that. He avoided that completely. But that could have been the same thing with him when he had Sidney Crosby and Malkin and Letang and all these other future Hall of Famers in front of him winning those 3 cups. So, if Fleury ends up getting a Stanley Cup in Vegas, that's going to cement him as a great goaltender. No arguments. But if you look at a Vasilevsky, if he's always going to have multiple Hall of Famers playing in front of him, that's going to hurt the debates later on in his career.
Yeah, it's kind of like a similar to the Tom Brady situation. Obviously 6 Super Bowls, eight Super Bowls, 6 titles.
I don't know. I mean, he never really had like any kind of all-star wide receivers except for like Randy Moss for a year or two. That was it. So like he's always worked less. He's always worked. He's always done more with less. And I think that's something that if you look at a Carey Price versus Vasilevsky, you're looking at a Carey Price who's done more with less, and then you have Vasilevsky who's playing with like 4 Hall of Famers in front of him. It's a little different, a little different debate.
The only comparison I was making is that people that don't want to give Tom Brady the credit as being the greatest of all time because they're trying to give Belichick the credit in the system, and then what happened? He went to Tampa and first year, won it right away. That's the only similarity I was trying to make is that.
Oh, right.
He erased the doubt of whether it was the system or him because, there you go.
That's very true from that standpoint. All right, so that does it for our show this week. Thank you very much, Scott Blanda, for stopping by.
Thank you for having me, sir.
All right, we'll be back next week. My name is Alfonso Caldero, LDM Radio Sports Talk.